At the orphanage, they called me unwanted and let me eat scraps left over by the others. But when a commission from the U.S. arrived looking for a billionaire's daughter who had gone missing 10 years ago and saw the butterfly-shaped birthmark on my neck, Luisa woke to the sharp sound of the bell, its echo ringing through the long corridors of the Santa Maria orphanage. 6 in the morning. As always. She slowly sat up on her narrow cot, tucked away in the farthest corner of the dormitory far from the windows and the other children's beds. Her spot had not been chosen at random, it had been assigned by the headmistress, Senora Herrera, on the very day Luisa first crossed the threshold of this place. Up! Hurry, shouted the duty caretaker, clapping her hands. Breakfast is in half an hour. The children rushed to the wash basins, pushing and interrupting one another. Luisa patiently waited until the line thinned out. She knew the rules of this place better than anyone. The most important rules stay invisible, especially when you bear a curse like the one on her neck. She gently touched the collar of her faded shirt, checking that it still hid the birthmark well. The dark brown mark, the size of a coin, shaped like a butterfly, sat right at the base of her neck. To Luisa, it was simply a mark on her skin. But to everyone else in Santa Maria, it was a sign of a curse. According to local superstition, the butterfly symbolized misfortune and grief. Even the year she arrived, the region had suffered a drought and poor harvest. Cursed Luisa is last again, one of the girls whispered as she passed. Probably scared her curse will spread to us through the water. Luisa pretended not to hear. After 10 years in the orphanage, she had learned to let words like that pass by untouched. She washed her face with cold water, braided her dark hair into a simple plait, and headed to the dining hall. The orphanage dining hall was a long room with peeling yellow walls and rows of wooden tables. The children were already eating corn porridge, a piece of bread, and a glass of milk each. Luisa stood by the wall, waiting patiently for everyone to finish. Such were the rules for the cursed girl she ate last, picking at what remained from the others' plates. When most of the children had finished and left, Luisa approached the serving counter, where Senora Maria stood, the only person in this place who looked at her without fear or disgust. "Good morning, child," the elderly cook greeted her softly, scraping the remains of the porridge from the bottom of the large pot into a bowl. "Here, this is all that's left." Luisa took the bowl of watery porridge with floating lumps and moved to gather uneaten pieces of bread from the now empty tables. But Senora Maria glanced around cautiously, then quietly called her back. "Wait," she whispered, slipping a small bun into the girl's hand. "I baked it this morning. Just don't tell anyone." "Thank you," Luisa whispered back, hiding the bun in her pocket. In the cook's eyes, there was sympathy and sorrow for the child. As always, Luisa went to the table in the farthest corner of the dining hall, where no one else ever sat. The other children avoided her as if her so-called curse could be passed through the air. Luisa didn't mind. Silence made it easier to think, to dream about the day she would become a doctor and help people. Look at her sitting all alone, Luisa heard Carlos's voice, a boy a year older than her. "Even the cockroaches are probably scared to go near her." Laughter echoed off the walls. Luisa kept eating her porridge in silence, though each spoonful went down with effort. Not because of the taste she had long since grown used to the orphanage's bland food, but because some days the loneliness felt heavier than usual. Suddenly, the orphanage director, Senora Herrera, walked into the dining hall, a tall, gaunt woman with gray hair pulled tightly into a severe bun. Her dark eyes immediately found Luisa in the corner. "Ah, here she is, our special girl," the director said with a poisonous smile. "Luisa, come here." The girl's heart clenched. Nothing good ever came from being singled out like that. She stood and approached the director, eyes lowered. "Potential parents are visiting today," Senora Herrera announced loud enough for all the children to hear. "I want you to stay away from the guests. We can't risk your condition scaring off good people from the other children." "Yes, Senora," Luisa replied quietly. "And make sure your collar stays buttoned at all times," the director added, yanking Luisa's shirt collar into place so sharply that the girl nearly lost her balance. "The last thing we need is for them to see that Devil's mark." After breakfast, while the other children went to their activities, Louisa made her way to the small chapel within the orphanage. It was the only place where she truly felt safe. Father Miguel, the young priest with kind eyes, wasn't afraid of her. He never treated her as cursed. "Ah, Louisa," he said with a warm smile when he saw her at the door. "Here for your lesson?" "Yes, Father Miguel," she replied, smiling genuinely for the first time that morning. Father Miguel was teaching her how to read and write. Not because it was his duty at the orphanage; they believed orphans only needed to know how to sign their name. He did it out of kindness, because he saw the hunger for knowledge in the girl's eyes. "Today we're studying human anatomy," said the priest, pulling out a worn medical book. "Do you still want to become a doctor?" "More than anything in the world," Louisa replied, and her voice grew stronger. Whenever she spoke about medicine, fear and doubt disappeared. "Then let's take a look at how the human heart works," Father Miguel said, opening the book to the right page. "You know, Louisa, the heart is a muscle that works all our lives, never stopping for even a second. It doesn't care about the color of your skin, whether you have birthmarks or scars. It just does its job. It gives life." Louisa listened intently, committing every word to memory. In these moments, she forgot she was considered cursed. She was just a girl who dreamed of helping people, of healing their pain and mending their wounds. "Father Miguel," she asked quietly, "is it true that I bring misfortune?" The priest closed the book and looked her in the eyes. "Listen to me carefully, my child. God made you special, not cursed. Your mark is a sign that you have a special purpose. Sometimes people fear what they don't understand. But that fear is theirs, it's not your fault." When the lesson ended, Louisa returned to the dormitory. There was still half an hour of free time before lunch. She climbed onto her cot and softly spoke to Pedro, the spider who lived in the corner near her bed. "Hi, Pedro," she whispered. "Today Father Miguel talked about the heart. Did you know it beats 70 times a minute? Can you imagine what an important job that is?" The spider twitched its legs, as if in response. Louisa smiled. Pedro was her only friend, the only living being that didn't run from her in fear. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to dream. In her dreams, she wasn't a cursed orphan. She was a doctor in a white coat. People came to her for help, and she healed them. Night always fell early at the Santa Maria orphanage. By 9 o'clock, all the children were expected to be in bed, and Louisa was no exception. She lay on her narrow cot in the corner, listening as the whispers and rustling in the dormitory gradually faded. One by one, the girls drifted off to sleep, and soon the room was filled with soft breathing and the occasional sniffle from someone crying in their sleep. Louisa turned onto her side and looked at the corner where Pedro sat in his web. "Turns out, blood moves through our body in a circle, like water in a stream," Louisa continued. "The heart is a pump that sends it to every corner of the body. Isn't that amazing?" Pedro swayed gently in his web, and Louisa imagined he was nodding in agreement. Fatigue slowly took over, and Louisa's eyelids grew heavy. She closed her eyes, and soon sleep carried her far away from the cold walls of the orphanage, from the cruel looks and whispers behind her back. And once again, she dreamed the same dream, the one that had returned to her for many months. She stood in a grand room with high ceilings and a sparkling chandelier. The walls were decorated with paintings and gilded frames, and a soft rug with intricate patterns covered the floor. Sunlight poured through massive windows, making everything seem so bright, so alive. "Anna, darling, come here," called a woman's voice, and Louisa, or Anna, as she was called in the dream, turned toward it. She saw a beautiful woman with golden hair and kind blue eyes. The woman held out her arms, and Louisa ran to her, feeling an overwhelming warmth and love. "My little princess," the woman said in a language Louisa didn't understand, yet somehow knew the meaning of every word. Beside the woman stood a tall man with the same gentle eyes as Louisa's. He lifted her into his arms and spun her around the room, and she laughed freely, joyfully, the way she never had in the orphanage. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a beautiful doll in a blue dress. But the most important part of the dream, no one looked at her neck in horror. No one crossed themselves at the sight of her. On the contrary, when the woman kissed her cheek, she gently touched the butterfly-shaped birthmark and said, "This is your special mark, my dear. It makes you unique and beautiful." In this dream, she had her own lovely room with a white lace-covered bed. Shelves overflowed with toys and books. Fresh flowers sat in a crystal vase on the desk. And most of all, she was loved. Truly, unconditionally loved. But the dream always ended the same way. Suddenly everything went black, a terrifying crash rang out, there were screams, and Louisa would wake up with her heart pounding. She opened her eyes and found herself once again in her hard cot in the corner of the orphanage dormitory. Her pillow was wet with tears. These dreams always left behind a strange mixture of warmth and unbearable longing. Louisa shut her eyes again, hoping the dream would return. But this time, something different came, hazy, frightening memories she had tried to forget. And they were not a dream. She saw herself as a small child, maybe 3 years old. She was in a dark room with clay walls and a dirt floor. Beside her was a woman, tall, thin, with long gray hair falling over her face. But the most terrifying part was her eyes. They were empty. Mad. The woman never spoke. Never. She simply sat in the corner and stared at little Louisa with an unblinking gaze. Sometimes she fed her bits of bread, leftover porridge, water from a clay jug. But always in silence, always with that terrifying, empty stare. Louisa would sit in the dark room, playing with pebbles she'd found and waiting for the woman to bring food. But one day, the woman didn't wake up. Louisa remembered shaking her by the shoulder, calling out to her, but the woman lay motionless, her eyes still open, still filled with madness. The little girl sat beside the dead woman the whole day, not understanding what was happening. Then people entered the house, men in uniforms, shouting and gesturing. They found the frightened child, took her away, and brought her to the orphanage. Louisa shivered, pulled back to the present. These memories always sent a chill through her chest. Who was that woman? Why had she hidden Louisa away from the rest of the world? Maybe she was my real mother? Louisa whispered to Pedro. But then why was she so strange? The questions swarmed in her head, but there were no answers. And no one she could ask. Louisa turned onto her other side and looked out the window. Stars shimmered in the dark sky. Somewhere out there, beyond those stars, maybe a world existed where she was loved, where someone was waiting for her. She closed her eyes again and drifted back into sleep. The epidemic began on Thursday morning, when little Jose couldn't get out of bed. He was only 6 years old and one of the few children who didn't shy away from Louisa. Sometimes, he even smiled at her when he thought no one was watching. "My head hurts," Jose complained to the caretaker, who casually placed a hand on his forehead. "A slight fever," she said. "Lie down today, you'll be good as new tomorrow." But by evening, Jose was burning with fever, and by Friday morning, 3 more children couldn't get up. By Saturday, there were 8 sick, and by Sunday 15. Panic swept through the orphanage. Louisa was sitting in her usual corner of the dining hall, finishing the leftover breakfast, when she heard Carlos's loud voice. "It's all because of her," he shouted, pointing directly at Louisa. "The cursed girl brought the sickness." "Yes, she did," one of the older girls chimed in. "The sickness started right after she slept next to Jose on the bus last week. We need to isolate her," added another boy. The children began backing away from Louisa, and some of the younger ones started crying out of fear. The girl felt her heart tighten painfully. "Enough!" snapped Senora Herrera, cutting through the argument as she entered the dining hall. "Everyone, back to your seats. And no more talk of superstitions." But even the director gave Louisa a suspicious look, and in that moment, the girl understood. Deep down, she too blamed Louisa for what was happening. After breakfast, Louisa didn't go to her usual lessons. Instead, she headed toward the makeshift infirmary that had been set up in one of the classrooms. Inside, the sick children lay on cots, some delirious with fever, others moaning weakly. The orphanage's only nurse, Senora Dolores, was in total despair. She rushed from bed to bed, not knowing what to do first. What are you doing here? She snapped when she saw Luisa standing in the doorway. Get out, now. I want to help, Luisa said quietly. Father Miguel taught me how to care for the sick. Help? The nurse scoffed. Get out. But Luisa didn't leave. When Senora Dolores turned away to tend to another child, Luisa quietly approached little Jose's bed. The boy was tossing in fever, his lips dry and his forehead burning. Luisa remembered Father Miguel's lessons with high fever. You needed to cool the patient and give them plenty of fluids. She dipped a cloth into a basin of water and gently placed it on Jose's forehead. He calmed almost instantly. Jose, she whispered. You have to drink some water. Just a little. She carefully lifted his head and brought a cup to his lips. The boy took a few sips, then closed his eyes again, but his breathing became steadier. For the next few hours, Luisa moved from one bed to the next. She changed the cold compresses, helped the children drink water, and straightened their blankets. Some children, even while feverish, seemed to recognize her touch and relaxed. What are you doing? Came the voice of Senora Dolores. The nurse stood in the doorway holding a tray of medicine, staring at Luisa in disbelief. I'm just helping, the girl answered, continuing to dab a wet cloth on one girl's burning forehead. But, the nurse began, then fell silent as she looked around the room. In just a few hours, many of the children truly did seem better. Some had a lower fever. Others had stopped thrashing and mumbling deliriously. How do you know what to do? The nurse asked, more quietly now. Father Miguel taught me, Luisa replied. He said the most important thing during a fever is to keep the body from overheating and make sure the patient stays hydrated. Senora Dolores nodded silently and didn't send Luisa away again. For the next 3 days, the girl barely left the infirmary. She slept in short bursts, right on a chair beside the sick beds, ate whatever Senora Maria brought her, and tirelessly cared for the children. She learned to recognize a rising fever by flushed cheeks and rapid breathing. She knew when to change a compress and when to give medicine. The children who once avoided her now reached for her hands, asking for help. Luisa, it hurts, little Jose whispered, and she stroked his head, humming a quiet lullaby. It'll be all right, she would answer. The illness will go away soon. But on the 4th day, the thing they all feared finally happened. Luisa woke up in the morning with a burning head and tremors running through her entire body. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed. Luisa! Senora Dolores cried, rushing to her. Oh God, she has the fever too. They moved the girl to an empty bed in the same infirmary. Her temperature rose rapidly, and soon Luisa slipped into delirium. Terrifying memories filled her dreams. The silent woman with the mad eyes sat in the corner of a dark room, staring at her unblinking. The woman's lips moved, but no sound came. And those eyes. They were filled with such pain and madness it made Luisa want to scream. Don't go outside, the woman finally said, her voice echoing through the dark room. They'll find you. The vision shifted. Luisa saw a bright flash of light, heard a thunderous crash and screaming. In the real world, Father Miguel never left Luisa's bedside. He prayed without ceasing, holding his rosary and murmuring prayers. From time to time, he moistened her lips with water or placed a cool compress on her burning forehead. Lord, the priest whispered, please don't take this girl. She has such a kind heart, such a deep desire to help others. She doesn't deserve this suffering. Senora Maria came by every hour, bringing fresh water and clean cloths. Even Senora Dolores, who had once feared Luisa, now gently adjusted her blanket and checked her temperature with care. It's strange, she said to Father Miguel on the 3rd day of Luisa's illness. Since she got sick, the other children have started getting better. Yesterday, the last 3 had their fevers break. The priest looked at the girl's pale face. Maybe she took the illness upon herself, he said quietly. Maybe the Lord is testing her, as he tested the righteous. On the 5th day, when everyone thought Luisa wouldn't survive, a miracle happened. The girl opened her eyes and asked for water. Her fever began to subside, and by evening, she was able to sit up in bed. "How are the others?" were the first words she spoke upon waking. "They're all well," Father Miguel replied, tears of joy in his eyes. "Everyone has recovered. You saved them, my child." But Luisa was still very weak. She could barely stand, and her head spun with every movement. The illness had drained her strength, and it would take time to recover. Strangely, after the epidemic, the children's attitude toward Luisa changed. Those she had cared for no longer ran from her in fear. Little Jose now smiled at her openly and sometimes even sat beside her at meals. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved me." But most of the other children still kept their distance. In fact, some seemed even more afraid now. "You see?" Carlos said. "First she brought the sickness, then she took it away. She's a real witch." Senora Herrera hadn't changed her opinion of Luisa either. On the contrary, now she watched the girl with even more suspicion. "I don't like this," the headmistress muttered. "It's too strange how the illness began and ended with her." But Father Miguel thought differently. "You've shown true compassion," he told Luisa once she had fully recovered. "You didn't think of yourself while others were suffering. That is the mark of a real healer and a real human being." Luisa lay in her cot, slowly regaining her strength, reflecting on everything that had happened. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain: she hadn't spent those days in the infirmary in vain. She had helped the other children, used the knowledge Father Miguel had given her. Let them call her cursed. Let them fear her birthmark. She knew the truth now. Her hands were made to heal. And no matter what, she would never stop using them to help. The next morning, Luisa had barely finished her breakfast when the orphanage was overtaken by a sudden wave of excitement. Children were running through the hallways, peeking through windows, and whispering eagerly among themselves. "A car! A black car!" shouted Carlos, his nose pressed against the window of the common room. "With license plates." "Look how fancy they are," added one of the girls. Luisa cautiously approached the window and looked outside. A black car was slowly making its way up the dusty road toward the orphanage's main entrance. It was so shiny and luxurious that it looked like it came from another world. The license plate bore strange symbols Luisa had never seen before. "Those are diplomatic plates," exclaimed one of the older boys. "That means these are very important people. Maybe they've come to adopt someone?" asked a little girl named Rosita, her voice full of hope. "Of course," Carlos jumped in. "Rich Americans come to choose kids sometimes. I heard that happens." Immediately, all the children began straightening themselves up. The boys combed their hair with their hands, the girls fixed their dresses and braided their hair. Even the youngest ones understood that something important was happening. "I'll behave really well," Rosita whispered. "Maybe they'll choose me, and I'll have real parents. I'll show them how well I can read," added Jose, who was still weak after the illness but also dreamed of a family. Luisa stood apart from the others, quietly observing the commotion. Deep down, a spark of wild hope flickered inside her. What if these important people didn't believe in silly superstitions? The car stopped at the main entrance, and people began stepping out. First came a tall man in his 40s, dressed in a dark, formal suit. His temples were beginning to gray, and his sharp gray eyes surveyed the orphanage building with a businesslike expression, as if assessing everything carefully. "Look how serious he is," someone whispered. "He's memorizing everything." Next came an elegant woman in a light-colored suit. Her dark hair was neatly tied up in a bun, and she carried a leather folder in her hands. She moved with the confidence of someone used to making important decisions. "She's so beautiful," one of the girls sighed admiringly. "And so elegant." Last came an elderly man with an official demeanor. A badge glinted on the lapel of his jacket, and he held a black diplomatic case in his hand. "Look at his badge," Carlos declared reverently. "And a genuine diplomatic briefcase." The children froze at the windows, afraid to miss a single detail. Each one imagined these important people about to enter, how they would choose children for adoption, how someone's life would change forever. But suddenly, Senora Herrera burst into the room. The headmistress's face was dark, and her eyes sparkled with anger. "Everyone, back to your places," she commanded sharply. Immediately. "Senora Herrera," timidly began Jose, "is it true that they have come?" "No questions," the headmistress cut him off. "Children, quickly line up in the big room. Everything must be perfect." The children began forming a line. Senora Herrera scanned each child, but when her gaze fell on Luisa, her face contorted in disgust. "And you," she hissed as she approached the girl, "come with me." "Where?" Luisa asked softly, though she already understood that nothing good awaited her. "Down to the basement. And sit there quietly until the guests leave." "But why?" Luisa couldn't hold back. "I haven't done anything wrong." Senora Herrera grabbed her by the shoulders so forcefully that the girl winced in pain. "Because I will not let your curse ruin this day," the headmistress hissed. They descended a narrow staircase into the basement of the orphanage. It was damp, cold, and smelled of mold. The only light seeped through a small window near the ceiling. In one corner stood old crates, broken furniture, and various tools. "Sit here and keep still," the headmistress ordered as she locked the door with a key. "If I hear even a sound, you'll be stuck here for a whole week." With Senora Herrera's footsteps fading away upstairs, Luisa was left alone in the dark basement. She sat on an old crate, hugging her knees. Tears pricked her eyes, but she forced herself not to cry. Crying wouldn't change anything. Through the small window, she could hear muffled sounds. The main entrance door slammed, meaning the guests had entered the building. Then voices and footsteps followed, though she could not make out any words. Luisa tried to imagine what was happening upstairs. Perhaps Senora Herrera was solemnly welcoming the guests, explaining the orphanage to them. The children had formed a line, each one hoping to be chosen. And there she sat in the basement, like a criminal. Time passed unbearably slowly. Luisa tried to fall asleep, curled up on the crate, but the cold and dampness wouldn't let her rest. And something else tormented her curiosity. Why had those people really come? If they truly wanted to adopt children, why did they look so official and businesslike? Adoptive parents usually came as couples, looking at the children with hope and tenderness. But these people seemed more like representatives of some important organization. Suddenly, something fell upstairs with a loud crash. Then came hurried footsteps and muffled, anxious voices. Luisa stood up and pressed her ear to the door, but the sounds were too far away to make out clearly. "What's going on up there?" she whispered. About an hour passed, during which the footsteps above grew more frantic. Someone was pacing quickly back and forth, doors were slamming, and snippets of conversation in an unfamiliar language echoed through the ceiling. And then, suddenly silence. Luisa grew tense. The quiet was more frightening than the noise. What if the guests had already left? What if they never learned she existed? Maybe one of the other children had truly found a family while she sat in the basement, missing it all? She went to the small window and stood on tiptoe, trying to see something. But the window faced the backyard, where sickly bushes grew and old junk was scattered around. "Senora Herrera," she called softly, hoping the headmistress might hear. "Can I come out now?" But there was no answer. The silence upstairs remained, and Luisa began to worry. What if something had happened? What if everyone had forgotten about her, and she was going to be left in the basement? She sat back on the crate and continued to wait. Her thoughts swirled about the important guests, about the children who dreamed of being adopted. Meanwhile, Senora Maria had watched from the window as the black car with diplomatic plates arrived and 3 people stepped out. The children made different guesses, and each one hoped that they would be the one chosen for adoption. "Children, quickly line up in the big room. Everything must be perfect," Senora Herrera had said. And when her eyes landed on Luisa, she had grabbed the girl's hand and led her down the staircase to the basement. Maria's heart ached. She felt so sorry for the girl, and she couldn't believe Herrera would do such a thing to Luisa, especially on such an important day. When Herrera returned, she barked out commands to the children. Stand up straight. Hands at your sides. And smile. Show them what good children you are. The children stood anxiously, hope shining in their eyes. Each of them dreamed that they would be the one chosen by the wealthy foreigners. Senora Maria stood off to the side, quietly observing everything. Soon, the three visitors entered the room. The tall man with graying temples, dressed in an expensive suit, carefully surveyed the row of children. Beside him stood the elegant woman holding a folder, and the elderly man with an official badge on his lapel. Welcome, Senora Herrera said in a syrupy tone. All our best children are here. Please choose anyone you like. The woman said something in English, then translated it into the local language. Mr. Parker would like to see all children between the ages of 11 and 15. Senora Maria's ears pricked up. 11 to 15. The Americans began walking slowly along the rows, studying each child intently. The interpreter asked questions. What is your name? How old are you? Do you remember anything from before the orphanage? The children answered nervously, doing their best to leave a good impression. But as time passed, the visitors' expressions grew more and more disappointed. It was clear they were looking for someone specific. The consulate representative is asking if there are any more children, the translator said. Especially girls with light skin and unusual markings. Senora Maria froze. Unusual markings. She immediately thought of the butterfly-shaped birthmark on Luisa's neck. Unusual markings? Senora Herrera repeated, a hint of unease in her voice. Yes, any moles, birthmarks, or scars with unusual shapes, the translator clarified. The headmistress paused, clearly thinking. Senora Maria saw her nervously clenching and unclenching her hands. Finally, Senora Herrera answered firmly. No. These are all our children. There's no one else. The cook felt something twist inside her with outrage. The headmistress was lying. She knew about Luisa, knew about her birthmark, and was deliberately hiding the girl. Upstairs, disappointed sighs could be heard. The tall man said something in English, and the translator relayed. Private Investigator James Parker thanks you for your cooperation, but unfortunately, the one we're looking for is not here. The one you're looking for? Senora Herrera asked, puzzled. But I thought you were here to adopt. We're looking for a specific child, the translator explained. On behalf of an American family. A girl who disappeared many years ago, and we have reason to believe she may be in one of the orphanages in this region. Senora Maria's heart skipped a beat. They were looking for a specific girl. A girl who had vanished years ago. And Senora Herrera had hidden Luisa away and lied to them. The private detective began gathering his documents. The consulate representative was putting papers back into his briefcase. The translator handed the headmistress a business card. If you remember anything, she said, these are our contacts. This is very important to the family. Of course, the headmistress mumbled, clearly relieved the guests were leaving. The children began to disperse, their disappointed voices echoing through the room. They didn't choose anyone. They weren't even adoptive parents. Senora Maria remained standing in the corner, deep in thought. The Americans were looking for a girl with unusual markings. A girl who had disappeared years ago. And Senora Herrera had locked Luisa in the basement. Something in Maria's heart told her this was incredibly important. What if these people really were looking for Luisa? What if the girl had a real family, searching for her? But on the other hand, Senora Herrera could fire her for going behind her back. Maria was not young anymore, and finding another job would be very difficult. She could hear the Americans preparing to leave. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway. Soon they would be gone and the opportunity would be lost forever. Lord, help me make the right decision, Senora Maria whispered, and suddenly she remembered how Luisa had cared for the sick children during the epidemic. How selflessly she fought for each life without thinking of herself. How she cried from loneliness when she thought no one could see. How she patiently endured mockery and scorn because of her birthmark. This girl deserves a chance, the cook said firmly, and quickly made her way to the basement. In the corridor, she could already hear the Americans' voices heading toward the exit. There was almost no time left. With trembling hands, Senora Maria unlocked the basement door. Luisa was sitting on an old crate, hugging her knees. Hearing footsteps, she looked up in surprise. "Senora Maria?" the girl asked. "What's happening?" "Quickly, my child," said the cook, reaching out her hand. "There's no time to explain. Important people are upstairs. They're looking for a girl with unusual markings." "Me?" Luisa couldn't believe her ears. "Possibly." "Hurry, they're leaving." Luisa jumped up, not fully understanding what was going on, but trusting the kind woman. Senora Maria took her by the hand and led her down the corridor toward the main entrance. "What about Senora Herrera?" the girl asked, frightened. "Whatever happens, happens," the cook said firmly. "Some things matter more than a job." They ran out into the courtyard just as the black car began pulling away from the building. Senora Maria waved her arms. "Wait. Please wait. There's one more child." The car came to a stop. The same three people stepped out: Private Investigator James Parker, the translator, and the consulate representative. "What's going on?" the translator asked in the local language. "There's another girl," Senora Maria said, breathless. "The headmistress hid her in the basement." The detective looked closely at Luisa. She stood beside the cook, thin and pale with anxiety, dressed in faded clothes. But it was her appearance that stood out: fair skin, gray-blue eyes, dark blonde hair. She clearly looked different from the other local children. "What is your name?" the woman asked Luisa. "Luisa," the girl replied quietly. "How old are you?" "I'm not sure," Luisa admitted. "The documents say 13, but that's just a random date. When I was brought to the orphanage, no one knew my exact age." "Do you remember anything from before the orphanage?" Luisa paused for a moment. "A little," she said cautiously. "I lived with a woman. But she was strange. Then she died, and they brought me here." The detective and the consulate representative exchanged a look. Something in the girl's story had caught their attention. "Can you lower your collar?" the translator asked gently. Luisa instinctively clutched at the neckline of her shirt. She had been told her whole life to hide her birthmark. "Don't be afraid, my child," said Senora Maria softly. "Show them." With trembling hands, Luisa unbuttoned the top of her shirt and pulled down the collar. On her neck was a clearly visible, dark brown birthmark in the shape of a butterfly. The reaction was immediate. Detective Parker exhaled sharply and said something quickly to his companions. The consulate representative opened his bag, pulled out a folder, and began flipping through papers frantically. "My God," whispered the translator. "It's her. It's really her." "Who am I?" Luisa asked, bewildered. "What's wrong with me?" But instead of answering, the detective asked another question through the translator. "How old were you when you arrived at the orphanage?" "Around 5, I think," Luisa replied. "And you don't remember anything about your family? About what your name used to be?" "No. I mean, sometimes I have strange dreams. A beautiful house. People speaking a language I don't understand. But I always thought they were just fantasies." The consulate representative scribbled something in a notebook and nodded to the detective. "We need to collect DNA samples immediately," the translator said. "And contact the family." "What family?" Luisa was growing more frightened. "What's happening?" At that moment, Senora Herrera came rushing out of the building. When she saw the scene unfolding near the car, her face twisted with rage. "What is going on here?" she shouted. "Maria, how dare you?" Headmistress, the translator said calmly, why did you hide this child from us? Because she's cursed, Senora Herrera blurted. She brings misfortune. In our region, the butterfly is a symbol of bad luck, a devil's mark. The private detective said something sharply, and the translator related. Mr. Parker says it's not a devil's mark. It's a birthmark. The birthmark we've been searching for 10 years. They began to lead Luisa toward the vehicle. Children gathered around them. Luisa, what's going on? Carlos asked. Are they taking you away? I don't know, Luisa replied, bewildered. Carlos stood at a distance, his face showing a mixture of envy and disbelief. It can't be, he muttered. There's no way the cursed one is being taken by rich Americans. But the consulate representative was already pulling out official documents, and the detective was speaking urgently into his phone. The translator turned to Senora Herrera and said, We are taking the girl for required tests and procedures. Everything will be handled officially. We must confirm whether she is the daughter of Mr. Harrison. But I don't understand, the headmistress stammered. Who is she? Possibly, the translator said carefully, the daughter of a very influential American family. She disappeared 10 years ago in a car accident in the mountains. Luisa felt the world spinning around her. An American family? A car accident? It all sounded like a fairy tale, but it explained the dreams, the beautiful house, the loving voices she never understood but always remembered. The children stood with mouths open, watching as the girl with the butterfly-shaped birthmark was escorted away by the American delegation in a sleek black SUV. Senora Maria stepped forward and gave Luisa a tight embrace. Go, my child, Senora Maria whispered. Go and don't look back. You deserve a better life. But what about you? Luisa asked, worried. Senora Herrera might fire you. Don't worry about me, the cook said with a smile. What matters is that you'll be all right. The private detective approached Luisa and gently said something in English. The translator interpreted. He says you're safe now. And that there are people who've been looking for you for a very long time. Luisa looked around at the children from the orphanage, at Senora Maria, at the familiar walls where she had spent years of her life. Then she turned her gaze toward the black car, the important people in expensive suits, the documents in the consulate officials' hands. Senora Maria watched the car drive away, tears in her eyes. Everything had happened so quickly it made her head spin. Luisa barely had time to understand what was happening before she found herself sitting in the black car, between the translator and the consulate representative. Private Investigator James Parker sat up front next to the driver, speaking rapidly into his phone in English. Where are we going? Luisa asked softly. First, to a medical center, the translator replied gently. They need to collect samples for testing. Then to the hospital. The hospital? Luisa asked, alarmed. But I'm not sick. It's just for a checkup, the woman reassured her. They need to make sure you're healthy and run the necessary tests. The car stopped in front of a small white building with a sign that read Medical Center. Luisa was led into a small room where a nurse in a spotless white coat gently took a swab from her mouth using a special stick. It doesn't hurt, the nurse said with a smile, seeing the fear on Luisa's face. Just open your mouth. The procedure truly only took a few seconds. The sample was sealed in a labeled tube, and the consulate representative carefully filled out some documents. The results will be ready in a week, he told the translator. Until then, the girl will remain under our care. The next stop was entirely different. St. Teresa's Hospital rose before them like a white palace. Luisa had never seen anything like it, gleaming glass doors, marble floors, and flowers in tall vases. This is a hospital? Luisa asked in amazement. But it's so beautiful. It's one of the best private hospitals in the city, the translator explained. You'll receive the very best care here. In the lobby, they were greeted by a doctor, a young man in a white coat with kind, dark eyes. Dr. Ramirez, he introduced himself. I'll be taking care of the girl." He spoke to the translator in English, and Louisa could tell they were discussing her condition. The doctor nodded several times and made notes in a small notebook. "The doctor says you'll need a full medical evaluation," the translator explained. "And plenty of rest. You were very undernourished at the orphanage." Louisa was led into an elevator, the first elevator she had ever been in. When the cabin began to rise, she gasped at the unfamiliar sensation. "We're going up?" she asked in wonder. "To the 5th floor," Dr. Ramirez smiled. "To your room." Her room was like something out of a fairy tale. Pristine white walls, a large soft bed with spotless sheets, a bedside table, and her own bathroom. There was a cozy chair by the window, and on the windowsill fresh flowers. This is all for me?" Louisa asked in disbelief. "Of course, dear," said the translator. "You'll stay here while we wait for the test results." A nurse brought her hospital pajamas, soft, clean, and smelling of freshness. Louisa changed in the bathroom, marveling at the hot water, the fluffy towels, and the real soap with its lovely scent. When she came out, Dr. Ramirez was waiting with a set of medical tools. "Don't be afraid," he said through the translator. "I'm just going to check how you're feeling." The examination was thorough but gentle. The doctor listened to her heart, checked her reflexes, and shone a small light into her eyes. Occasionally, he frowned and wrote something down. He carefully felt the lymph nodes on her neck and underarms, and examined the condition of her skin and hair. 15 minutes later, another doctor entered the room. "This is Dr. Santiago Moreno, a cardiothoracic surgeon," Dr. Ramirez introduced him. "He's here to examine your heart after all the stress you've been through." Dr. Moreno was focused and quiet. He listened to Louisa's heart through a stethoscope, reviewed her ECG, and made several notes in her chart. "Functional rhythm disturbances due to malnutrition," Dr. Moreno stated dryly, addressing Dr. Ramirez. "Nothing critical. Proper nutrition and rest will resolve the issue." By evening, Louisa was lying in her wonderful bed, still unable to believe what was happening. Dinner was brought on a tray, not leftover porridge and crumbs of bread, but real food. Chicken soup, soft bread with butter, and fruit she hadn't seen in months. "All this is for me?" she asked the nurse. "Of course, dear," the nurse smiled. "Eat as much as you like. You need to regain your strength." That first night, Louisa barely slept, not from worry, but from amazement. The mattress was so soft, the sheets so smooth, and the room so warm and cozy. She got up several times to make sure it wasn't a dream. In the morning, Dr. Ramirez came with the first test results. Anemia, vitamin deficiency, general malnourishment, he listed through the translator. "But it's all treatable. We'll feed you properly and give you the supplements you need." The days in the hospital passed calmly and steadily. Each morning, Louisa woke in her soft bed and had a delicious breakfast brought right to her room. Dr. Ramirez visited twice a day, checked her condition, and was pleased with her progress. "You're getting better by the day," he told her. "Your cheeks are pink, your eyes are bright. See? You're a beautiful girl." And Louisa truly did feel better with each passing day. Her strength returned, and the constant exhaustion that had followed her in the orphanage began to fade. She wasn't chronically ill, she'd simply been underfed and neglected. On the third day, a psychologist came to visit a kind elderly woman who spoke the local language. "Tell me about your dreams," she asked. "About what you remember from before the orphanage." Louisa shared her visions: the beautiful house, the loving people, the woman with the mad eyes. The psychologist listened attentively and took notes. "Those might be real memories," she said at the end. "A child's memory works in mysterious ways. Sometimes what seems like a dream is something that actually happened." The nurses in the hospital treated Louisa with special care. They brought her books, showed her how to use the TV in her room, and told her about the world beyond the hospital walls. "How do you know I'm special?" Louisa asked one of them. "Don't you feel it?" The nurse smiled. "Important people don't search for someone for 10 years without reason. You must be very dear to someone." By the end of the week, Louisa looked completely different. Healthy color in her cheeks, shiny hair, clear eyes. She had even gained a little weight. Dr. Ramirez was very pleased. "It's amazing how quickly a child's body can recover with proper care," he said, and then the day everyone had been waiting for arrived. The 7th day. That morning, the translator and the consulate representative entered Louisa's room. Their faces were solemn, but Louisa couldn't tell if it was good news or bad. "Have the results come?" she asked quietly. "Yes," the translator nodded. "Louisa, please sit down." The girl sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched into fists. Her heart was beating so loudly, she was sure it could be heard all the way down the hall. "The match is 99.9%, the translator announced with ceremony. "You are indeed the one we've been looking for." Louisa felt the world spin around her. A 99.9% DNA match. That meant, "I have a family," she whispered. "A real family?" "Yes, dear," the woman smiled. "And your family is very eager to see you. Your father is already on his way." "My father?" Louisa repeated, tears of joy welling in her eyes. "I have a father." "You do. And he's been searching for you for so long. Hoping every day that he'd find you." Louisa fell back onto the pillows, covering her face with her hands. All those years, all those dreams of loving parents, they weren't fantasies. Somewhere far away, someone had truly considered her his daughter. "When will he arrive?" she asked, wiping her tears. "Tomorrow," the translator replied. "He boarded the plane the moment he got the results." That night, Louisa couldn't fall asleep. She lay in her warm, cozy hospital room thinking about the day ahead. Tomorrow she would meet her father. Tomorrow she would learn her real name, where she came from, what had happened to her. And the butterfly-shaped birthmark on her neck no longer felt like a curse. It had become the key that opened the door to a new life. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, to fate, to God, to every kind force that had brought her to this moment. "Thank you for letting me live to see this day." Louisa woke at dawn, even though she usually slept until 8. Her heart was pounding so loudly it seemed to have woken her up. Today, her father was coming. Her real father. She got up and walked to the window. Beyond the glass stretched an unfamiliar city, just waking under the morning sun. Somewhere out there, at the airport, a plane had already landed. Somewhere out there was a man who had been searching for her for 10 years. "Good morning, dear," said the nurse as she entered with a breakfast tray. "Nervous?" "Very," Louisa admitted. "What if he's disappointed in me? What if I'm not how he remembers me?" "You were a little girl when you disappeared," the nurse said gently. "Of course you've changed. But he loves you, otherwise he wouldn't have searched for so long." Breakfast remained mostly untouched. Louisa couldn't eat, she was too anxious. She changed clothes several times, choosing the best among the hospital outfits she had been given. She brushed her hair as neatly as she could. At 10 o'clock, hurried footsteps echoed in the corridor. Louisa froze by the window, listening. Voices speaking English. Among them one man's voice, full of emotion. The door to her room opened. The familiar translator stepped in first, followed by Dr. Ramirez. And then a man in his 50s entered, graying hair, a tired but hopeful face. He was tall, dressed in a fine dark suit, but it was his eyes that mattered most. Gray-blue, exactly like Louisa's. He stopped in the doorway and simply stared at her. His lips trembled, and his eyes filled with tears. "Anna?" he said softly. "My little Anna?" Louisa felt something stir deep inside her at that name. Not Louisa Anna. As if something long forgotten had awakened in her memory. "Papa?" she whispered, not even knowing where the word came from. Robert Harrison, now she knew his name, stepped forward and gently embraced her. He smelled of an unfamiliar, expensive cologne, but there was something familiar, safe, in his arms. "My God, how much you've grown," he said, and the translator quietly echoed his words. My little girl. I've been searching for you for so long. So long. Louisa stood in his arms and cried. She didn't understand every word he said, but she could feel the love in every sound of his voice. I'm so sorry, Robert continued. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. That I lost you. He pulled back slightly and steadied her face closely, as if memorizing every feature. You look so much like your mother, he said with a sad smile. The same eyes, the same stubborn chin. My mother? Louisa repeated. Tell me about her. Tell me what happened. Robert sat down in the chair beside her bed and let out a heavy sigh. It was 10 years ago, he began, and the translator carefully relayed each word. We were traveling. Me, your mother Emily, and you. You were 3 years old, so curious, always asking questions. Louisa listened, holding her breath. We were driving along a mountain road, admiring the scenery. And then the rain started. Heavy rain. The road began to wash out, and our car. His voice trembled. The car slid off the cliff and into a river. What happened next? Louisa whispered. I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. I had a concussion, broken ribs. Locals found me unconscious on the riverbank. I couldn't remember anything. Robert ran a hand over his face, recalling those terrible days. The rescue team searched for you and Emily. They found Emily's body a week later. Downstream. But you were gone. No body, no trace. It was as if you had simply vanished. And after that? After that, I never stopped searching. I hired the best private investigators. I searched hospitals, orphanages, shelters within hundreds of kilometers. I hoped someone had found you, had saved you. But the years passed. And there was nothing. Louisa sat in silence, trying to connect his story to the fragments of memory she still carried. I remember a silent woman, she said slowly. With long hair and strange eyes. She kept me hidden in a dark room. Robert nodded. The detective thinks someone must have found you after the accident and took you in. Maybe that woman meant well. But she was unwell. And when she died, they sent you to the orphanage under a false name. So, my name isn't Louisa? The girl asked. Your real name is Anna. Anna Harrison, Robert said, smiling through tears. Anna. The name felt right. As if she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to say it. And now what happens? She asked. Now you're going home, Robert said. To America. We have a big house, and your room is waiting for you. All your toys, your books, I kept everything, hoping you'd come back. But I don't know how to speak English, Anna said, suddenly worried. I don't know how to live there. That's all right, her father reassured her. We'll get you tutors. You'll learn quickly. What matters is that you're alive and we're together again. There was a quiet knock at the door. Dr. Ramirez said something to Robert, who nodded. The doctor says you need a few more days to recover, the translator explained. After that, you'll be ready to fly home. Where is home? Anna asked. In California. In a city called Beverly Hills, Robert replied. It's warm there, there's the ocean, beautiful gardens. You're going to love it. Anna tried to imagine this unknown world, but all she could see were vague shapes from her childhood dreams. Papa, she said, and the word felt so natural, as if she'd been saying it all her life. Will I have brothers and sisters? Robert paused for a moment. I have a wife, he said gently. Victoria. I married her a year ago. She has 2 children from her first marriage, Kyle and Chloe. They're around your age. Are they? Are they nice? Anna asked hesitantly. Of course, Robert said reassuringly. They're very excited to meet you. Victoria, too. She flew here with me. She's waiting downstairs in the car. They're here? Anna asked, surprised. Yes. Would you like to meet them? Anna nodded, though her stomach tightened with nervousness. Finding her father was one thing, meeting a whole new family was something else entirely. A few minutes later, 3 people entered the room. First came an elegant blonde woman in her mid-30s, dressed in a stylish light-colored suit. Behind her were 2 teenagers, a boy slightly older than Anna, and a girl about her age. "Anna, this is Victoria," Robert said. "My wife." Victoria approached the bed with a broad smile. "Hello, sweetheart," she said through the translator. "I'm so happy you've been found. Robert searched for you for such a long time." There was warmth in her voice, but Anna felt something wasn't quite sincere. Maybe she just wasn't used to such polished manners. "And this is Kyle," Robert said, gesturing to the boy. "He's 15. Kyle was tall, with dark hair and green eyes. He gave a polite nod, but Anna noticed him looking her over with a critical gaze. "And Chloe," Robert added. "She's 12, almost your age." Chloe was a very pretty girl with long blonde hair and big blue eyes. She smiled sweetly, but even in that smile, Anna sensed something cold. "Hi," Chloe said. "Mom says we have a sister now." "Yes," Anna replied hesitantly. "I guess so." Victoria sat on the edge of the bed and took Anna's hand in her perfectly manicured ones. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she said. "We'll help you get used to your new life. Our house is big, there's room for everyone." Robert watched the scene with a contented smile. To him, it looked like his family was welcoming his long-lost daughter with open arms. "Soon, we'll all fly home," he said, "and start a new life together." Anna nodded and smiled, doing her best to show she was happy. But deep inside, there was a quiet unease. Something about the new family unsettled her, though she couldn't quite explain what. Robert's love and joy were genuine, she could feel it in every word and every look. But the others felt like actors in a play. "Papa," she said softly, after Victoria and the children stepped out into the hallway. "Can I just stay as Anna for now? I don't have to be part of a big family right away." Robert looked at her with understanding. "Of course, sweetheart. You're right. It takes time to adjust. There's no rush." He hugged her again, and in his arms, Anna felt truly safe. She had a father who loved her, that was what mattered most. The next day, after meeting the family, her father came to visit her again. But this time, he wasn't alone. With him came Private Detective James Parker. The tall man with graying temples looked tired, but satisfied. "Anna," said Robert, sitting down beside the bed, "Mr. Parker wants to tell you how we found you. How he realized you were the girl we were looking for." The detective took a seat in the chair opposite her and pulled out a few documents and photographs from his folder. "It was a very difficult investigation," he began through the translator. 10 years of searching hundreds of orphanages, hospitals, and shelters. We were looking for a girl of a certain age with a butterfly-shaped birthmark on her neck." "And how did you find out about the Santa Maria orphanage?" Anna asked. The detective showed her a photograph and image of an old house in the forest, half ruined and abandoned. "I found this house. A woman named Concepcion Garcia lived there. The neighbors told a strange story. She lost her 2 children during an epidemic many years ago and went mad afterward." Anna studied the photograph carefully, and something about it felt familiar. "Concepcion was a recluse," the detective continued. "She was afraid of people, rarely came into the village." "Concepcion probably found you after the car accident," the detective explained. "The river carried wreckage far downstream. It's likely it carried you, too, and she picked you up on the shore. According to neighbors, Concepcion walked to the river for water every morning. It was part of her daily ritual for many years. On June 3rd, the day after your accident, she went down to the river as usual with her clay jugs." "And why didn't she give me back?" Anna asked. "Why didn't she tell the authorities?" "Because she was ill," the detective said sadly. "The death of her own children shattered her mind. In you, she saw a replacement for the one she'd lost. And she was terrified someone would find out and take away the only thing she had left." He showed another photo, an image of a woman with 2 children, crossed with a black ribbon. This is Concepcion with her son and daughter, Luisa and Juan. They died of fever when they were 6 and 8 years old. Ana felt something stir in her memory. Vague images of a dark room, a weeping woman who called her by names that weren't hers. I remember her, Ana whispered. She was always crying. And she used to hide me whenever people passed by the house. Yes, the detective nodded. She was afraid someone would discover you and take you away. That's why she kept you in isolation. What happened after that? Ana asked. Concepcion died, said the detective. The neighbors found you in the house next to her body. You were frightened. You were only able to say your name was Luisa. That's what she must have called you, Luisa, the name of her deceased daughter. The authorities registered you as Luisa of unknown origin and sent you to the orphanage. My job is done, he added. 10 years of searching, but I kept my promise. I found you. After he left, father and daughter sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Robert spoke. Tomorrow we'll fly to America. We'll start a new life. Do you want to see your real home? Yes, Papa, Ana smiled. Very much. But deep inside, a quiet unease stirred. Ana had never seen an airplane up close before. The giant metal bird stood on the runway, surrounded by uniformed workers checking things and loading luggage. Her head spun at the thought that this enormous thing was supposed to fly. Don't be afraid, sweetheart, Robert said gently, noticing how tightly she clutched his hand. The flight will only take a few hours. You'll get to see the clouds from above. Victoria walked beside them in an elegant travel outfit, while Kyle and Chloe chatted in English, occasionally glancing at Ana. She felt awkward in the simple clothes bought at the hospital, surrounded by these polished, sophisticated people. Inside the plane, Ana froze in amazement. It looked nothing like the public transport she had seen in the town near the orphanage. Soft leather seats, tables with drinks, and flight attendants in stylish uniforms. This is a private jet, Robert explained. Our jet. Yours? Ana asked in disbelief. You have your own plane? Dad has a lot of things, Kyle said casually. Planes, yachts, houses in different countries. Takeoff was the scariest and most magical experience of Ana's life. When the plane lifted off the ground and started to ascend into the sky, she felt her breath catch. Then, when they broke through the clouds, she saw an endless white blanket beneath them and brilliant sunlight above. Beautiful, isn't it? Robert smiled, watching his daughter's face light up in awe. During the flight, Victoria was polite and kind. She showed Ana how to buckle her seatbelt, explained how the air conditioning worked, and offered her food and drinks. But Ana noticed that when Robert fell asleep or was distracted by phone calls, her stepmother's expression changed. It became cold, distant. After the flight, they landed in Los Angeles. The airport stunned Ana with its size and the number of people. Lights flickered everywhere, screens displayed information in various languages. People rushed by with suitcases, talking on phones, greeting one another. Welcome to America, Robert said, hugging his daughter. A black limousine with a uniformed driver was waiting for them. Ana had never seen such a long car. Inside, there was a bar, a television, and seats softer than any bed in the orphanage. Wow, she whispered, taking in the luxurious interior. That's nothing, Chloe said indifferently. Wait till you see the house. The ride to Beverly Hills passed towering skyscrapers, palm trees, and sparkling shop windows. Ana pressed her face to the window, trying to memorize every detail of this unbelievable world. Everything was so bright, so clean, so expensive. Then the limousine turned into a quiet neighborhood with wide streets and enormous houses hidden behind tall gates and lush gardens. Here we are, Robert announced as the car stopped in front of a gate marked with the letter H. The gates opened slowly, and the limousine drove up the long driveway. Ana looked out the window and gasped. Before her stood a real palace. White columns, wide marble steps, enormous windows glittering in the sunset. Around the house stretched manicured gardens with fountains, statues, and flower beds of exotic blooms. This is your house?" Anna whispered. "Our house," Robert corrected her. "Your house." As they stepped out of the car, an elderly woman in simple but neat clothes approached them. She had a kind face and gray hair tied in a bun. "This is Carmen," Robert introduced. "Our housekeeper. She runs the household." Carmen gave a small bow and said something in Spanish. Anna flinched in surprise. It had been so long since she heard the language that had become her own. "Welcome home, Señorita Anna," Carmen said with a warm smile. "I'm so happy you finally returned." "Thank you," Anna replied in Spanish, and something inside her eased. While she had been in the hospital, Anna had studied English every day. It came to her fairly easily. Inside, the house was even more luxurious than it looked from the outside. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings in gilded frames, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. A wide staircase led to the second floor, and the ceilings were so high that voices seemed to vanish into them. "Let me show you your room," Robert said, and led Anna up the stairs. The room he opened was bigger than the entire orphanage. A huge canopy bed, a desk, bookshelves, a walk-in closet, and a private bathroom. By the window stood a cozy little sofa, and the shelves were filled with toys and books. "I kept everything," Robert said, his voice trembling. "All your things. I always hoped you would come back." Anna walked over to the shelf and picked up a plush teddy bear. Something about it felt familiar, as if she had held it long ago. "Is this mine?" she asked. "Yes. His name is Teddy. You used to carry him everywhere." She hugged the bear to her chest, and a wave of faint memories washed over her. Warm hands tucking her into bed. A voice singing a lullaby. "Safety and love." "Rest, my dear," Robert said. "Dinner will be soon. Carmen will help you get settled." When he left, Anna remained alone in the vast room. The luxury was overwhelming. She didn't know if she was allowed to sit on the elegant furniture or touch the expensive items. At the orphanage, she would have been punished for far less. She walked to the window and looked out. Below stretched a garden with a pool the size of a lake. Gardeners were watering flower beds, and in the distance, the lights of Los Angeles shimmered. "Señorita Anna," came a knock on the door. "May I come in?" "Of course," Anna replied, glad to hear Spanish. Carmen entered with a tray of food and set it on the table. "I thought you might be hungry," she said. "And that it might be easier for you to eat here in your room, at least for now." "Thank you," Anna said gratefully. "Can I ask, how long have you worked here?" 15 years now," Carmen replied, sitting in an armchair. "I saw you grow up as a little girl. And then came that terrible trip, and Senor Robert lost everything." "Tell me about him," Anna asked. "What was he like back then?" Carmen gave a sad smile. "He was a different man when Senora Emily was alive and when you were home," Carmen said softly. "He laughed, played with you, organized family holidays. But after you disappeared, work consumed him. He was hardly ever home, always searching for you, meeting with detectives, flying all over the world." "And Victoria?" Anna asked cautiously. Carmen paused, choosing her words carefully. "Senora Victoria is a beautiful and intelligent woman. She helped Senor Robert come out of his depression. But..." The housekeeper hesitated again. "But what?" "We'll talk later, Señorita," Carmen said gently, avoiding the question. "And remember, if you ever need anything, come to me. Always." Dinner took place in an enormous dining room with a long table that could seat 20 people. Anna sat next to Robert, across from Victoria and her children. In front of each seat was a collection of utensils, knives, forks, and spoons of various sizes. Anna stared at the elegant cutlery in confusion. At the orphanage, there had been just one spoon. At the hospital, a simple fork and knife. She had no idea which utensil was for what. The first course arrived, a delicate soup decorated with herbs. Anna picked up the large spoon and began to eat, trying not to make noise. "Dear," Victoria said gently, "let me show you. For soup, we use the smaller spoon. Like this." She demonstrated the correct one, smiling with maternal warmth. "Thank you," Anna replied, embarrassed. "It's okay," Keel added. "We'll help you with everything. Right, Chloe?" "Of course." Chloe agreed cheerfully. "We have a sister now, and we have to take care of each other." When the main course arrived, meat with some sort of elaborate garnish, Anna was once again unsure. Not knowing how to properly handle the utensils, she tried to cut the meat, but the piece slipped off her plate. "Here, let me help you." Chloe stood up and came over. "Hold the knife in your right hand, and the fork in your left. See? Now gently cut it." "Chloe is so thoughtful," Robert said with delight. "I'm so glad you two are getting along." "We're family now, Dad," Chloe said with a sweet smile. "Anna is our sister." Victoria observed the scene with a satisfied smile, occasionally correcting Anna like a loving stepmother. "Tomorrow Chloe can show Anna around the house," Victoria suggested. "And Kyle can tell her about the school they'll be attending together." "Great idea," Robert agreed. "Kids, will you help Anna settle in?" "Of course, Dad," Kyle and Chloe replied in unison. But Anna noticed that whenever Robert got distracted by a phone call, the expressions on his stepchildren's faces would change for a moment. They became cold, indifferent. And as soon as Robert returned his attention to the table, they transformed again into caring siblings. After dinner, Robert gave her a tour of the house, the library, living rooms, gym, home theater. Everything was enormous, expensive, and completely unfamiliar. Anna felt like she was in a museum where you weren't allowed to touch anything. "Tomorrow we'll start arranging tutors for you," Robert said. "English, math, science." "All right, Papa," Anna agreed, though all these plans made her nervous. "And now, forgive me, darling, I need to make a few important calls to Asia," Robert said, glancing at his watch. "It's business hours there." "Victoria, kids, show Anna the rest of the house." "Of course, dear," Victoria smiled. "We'll have a wonderful time." As soon as Robert disappeared into his office and closed the door, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The smiles vanished, as if wiped away. Victoria sat down in an armchair and picked up a magazine, not even glancing at Anna. Kyle pulled out his phone and started typing, ignoring her completely. "Could you show me the rest of the rooms?" Anna asked uncertainly. "Why?" Chloe replied coolly. "You can figure it out yourself." "But Papa asked." "Papa asks for a lot," Kyle said coldly, without looking up. "That doesn't mean we have to follow all his whims." Anna felt a tight knot form in her chest. She stood in the middle of the luxurious living room, surrounded by people who, just a minute ago, had called her their sister and now looked at her like she didn't exist. "I thought maybe we could get to know each other," Anna tried again. "Get to know each other?" Victoria finally looked up from her magazine. "Darling, we live in the same house. That's quite enough." "But," "No buts," Chloe cut her off. "You want to live here? Fine. But don't expect us to jump for joy." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Robert was coming. Instantly, everything changed. Victoria set aside her magazine and stood up with a caring smile. Kyle put away his phone, and Chloe walked over to Anna and took her arm. Anna was thrilled by the library, Chloe said as Robert entered the room. "Weren't you, little sister?" "Yes," Anna replied, confused, not understanding what had just happened. "Wonderful," Robert smiled. "Tomorrow we'll start choosing books to help you study English." "I'll help her pick," Kyle offered. "We have a lot of interests in common." "You're getting along so well," Robert said contentedly. "I'm so happy to have such a close-knit family." When Anna returned to her room, her head was spinning. She couldn't grasp what had happened. Why were the people who acted so kind around her father completely different when he wasn't there? She walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. In the orphanage, everything was simple. If someone didn't like you, they showed it openly. But here Here she felt like she was part of a play, where everyone knew their role except her. Maybe I'm just tired, she whispered to her reflection in the glass. Maybe tomorrow will be different. But deep inside, unease was growing. Something was wrong with this family. Something hid behind their smiles and kind words. She crawled into the luxurious bed, hugging her teddy bear, Teddy. On Monday morning, Anna stood in front of the mirror, putting on the uniform of the prestigious St. Margaret's School. A navy blazer with a crest, a white blouse, a gray skirt, everything was perfect. "Don't worry, darling," Robert said over breakfast. "Kyle and Chloe will help you settle in. The children at that school are wonderful." "Of course, Papa," Chloe smiled. "We'll take care of everything." "Yes," Kyle nodded. "We'll introduce Anna to all our friends." In the car on the way to school, Kyle and Chloe were friendly and attentive. "Listen, Anna," Kyle said, "reputation is really important at our school. You understand?" "Not really," Anna admitted. "Well, people there are used to a certain standard," Chloe explained. "So we'll tell them about you in a way that makes them see how special you are." "Thanks," Anna said, not quite understanding why there was a strange note in Chloe's voice. St. Margaret's School was breathtaking in its grandeur. Gothic buildings, manicured lawns, luxury cars in the parking lot. The students looked like they had stepped out of a fashion magazine. Perfect hairstyles, expensive uniforms, confident manners. The first introduction happened in the hallway, where a group of Kyle and Chloe's classmates had gathered. "Guys," Kyle said, putting his arm around Anna's shoulders, "I want you to meet my sister. This is Anna." "Hi," the girl greeted shyly. "Anna has an incredible story," Chloe continued with a sympathetic smile. "She spent 10 years in an orphanage. Can you imagine? 10 years without a family, without a home." The classmates looked at Anna with curiosity and pity. "Wow," one of the girls whispered. "That must have been horrible." "Poor thing," another added. "How did you survive?" "Anna is very strong," Kyle said in a patronizing tone. "She's been through a lot." "Right, Anna?" Anna nodded, feeling uncomfortable with so much attention on her past. "How did they find you?" one of the boys asked. "Dad. Robert, searched for me for a very long time," Anna replied. "Yeah, our dad is a real hero," Chloe said proudly. "He spent millions on the search. Hired the best detectives." "Wow," someone marveled. "Just like in a movie." Throughout the day, Anna noticed that the students looked at her differently. Not with hostility, but not quite with friendliness either. More like she was some kind of curiosity worth observing. During the long break, Kyle was telling his friends loudly. "You know the kind of place Anna used to live in? An orphanage with 50 kids. Slept on a metal bed, ate from a communal pot. Can you imagine the contrast with our house?" "Horrifying," gasped one of the girls. "Poor Anna, how did you cope? Is it true you didn't know how to use a fork and knife?" another asked. Anna blushed. "How did they know such details?" "Chloe told us," the boy explained. "She said you had some trouble with etiquette at first." "It's no big deal," Chloe quickly added, stepping up to the group. "Anna's learning fast. Right, little sister?" "Yes," Anna answered quietly, feeling her cheeks burn. By the end of the first week, the whole school knew Anna's story but the version told by Kyle and Chloe. They didn't lie, but they presented the facts in a way that made Anna seem like a pitiful victim of circumstance, taken in out of charity by a wealthy family. "I heard she could barely read when she arrived," whispered the girls in the locker room. "And they say she has strange habits." Chloe said Anna talks to herself sometimes. Probably from being alone in the orphanage. "Poor girl. Good thing the Harrisons are so kind. Not every family would take in such a troubled child." Anna overheard these conversations and couldn't understand why her story sounded so humiliating. She had been proud of surviving, proud that she learned to read thanks to Father Miguel, proud of helping care for sick children. But in Kyle and Chloe's version, all of that became proof of her inadequacy. The worst part was the fake concern. Anna, one classmate said during English class, don't be shy if you don't understand something. We all know about your special background. Yeah, added another. The teacher said you'll be given some leniency. Since you're starting from scratch. Anna wanted to say that she actually understood English quite well, thanks to her lessons at the hospital, but the words wouldn't come out. She felt like a sick kitten everyone pitied but no one took seriously. In PE class, things got worse. The girls noticed the small scars on Anna's arms, remnants of childhood falls and scrapes. Oh my God, what's that? One of them gasped. Scars, Anna replied simply. Did they hit you in the orphanage? Another girl asked, horrified. No, it's just. You don't want to talk about it, we get it, a third girl said sympathetically. The trauma must still hurt. By evening, the entire school was buzzing about the signs of abuse on Anna's arms. The story grew new details that never existed. Some said she'd been starved, others claimed she'd been forced to work in the kitchen. Anna had become not just an object of pity but a symbol of childhood suffering. Poor girl, said the parents of other students. Can you imagine what she's been through? And how bravely she holds herself together, others would respond. Though it's clear her psyche is traumatized. It's a good thing Robert Harrison is such a man. Not everyone would take on that kind of responsibility. At dinner that evening, Anna tried to bring up her concerns. Dad, at school. Everyone looks at me strangely, she began cautiously. What do you mean? Robert asked, concerned. They all know about the orphanage, about the difficulties I had. And they treat me like I'm sick. What are you talking about, sis? Chloe said in surprise. Everyone is amazed by your story. They say you're so strong and brave. Yeah, Kyle added. People respect you for what you've been through. A lot of them want to be friends. Maybe it just feels that way to you, Robert said gently. Kids are naturally curious, but that's from interest, not dislike. We've been telling your story in a way that shows how special you are, Victoria added. Isn't that a good thing? Anna nodded, unsure how to explain that their care made her feel like some kind of research specimen. The following week, things reached a peak. Kyle and Chloe decided to embellish their stories with new details. You know, Kyle confided to a group of classmates, Anna sometimes acts oddly. Yesterday I saw her talking to herself in the garden. Really? The kids asked, intrigued. Yeah, just standing there muttering something. Mom says it's from psychological trauma, Chloe added with a sigh. In the orphanage, that was probably her only way to cope with loneliness. And also, Kyle continued, lowering his voice, sometimes she takes food and hides it in her room. Probably afraid she won't be fed. Habit from the orphanage. That's awful, one girl whispered. Poor thing still can't believe she's safe. A few days later, Chloe shared another touching anecdote. Yesterday, Anna grabbed a kitchen knife when she saw the gardener outside the window. She thought he was a burglar. Dad says that kind of hypervigilance is normal. Kids from orphanages often have heightened anxiety. She's aggressive? A boy asked cautiously. No, Chloe quickly assured. Just skittish. But sometimes her reactions are a little off. The doctor said she just needs time to adapt. By the end of the week, rumors were already circulating at school that Anna was mentally unstable. Her classmates began avoiding her not only out of pity but also out of fear. I heard she can snap for no reason, the girls whispered in the locker room. Kyle told me she's afraid of loud noises. During music class, she almost fainted. Poor Harrison family. It must be so hard living with a child like that. Good thing Kyle and Chloe are so understanding. Not everyone could tolerate it. Anna noticed that her classmates were avoiding her even more. If before they looked at her with pity, now they looked with caution. Like a ticking time bomb that could go off at any moment. Anna, her literature teacher, said gently after class, if there's anything you don't like at school or if you feel uncomfortable, please tell us. We all understand your situation. What situation? Anna asked, confused. Well, your past, your adjustment. Kyle and Chloe mentioned that you sometimes have behavioral challenges. Anna felt her face flush. What challenges? What were they telling people? I don't understand, she whispered. Don't worry, dear. No one is judging you. All children who've been through trauma need special attention. That day Anna couldn't take it anymore and approached Kyle after class. Why does the teacher think I have behavioral problems? Don't you? Kyle asked with a look of innocent surprise. Remember when you yelled at the gardener last week? I didn't yell. I just asked what he was doing in the garden at night. To us, it's a normal question. To you it was a panic trigger, Kyle said gently. We understand where that comes from. But I wasn't panicking. Anna, Chloe interrupted patiently, we're not blaming you. We're just telling people the truth so they understand why you sometimes react differently. What truth? Anna asked, her voice full of despair. That you had a difficult childhood. That you have some behavioral traits. That you need support, Kyle listed calmly. Is that really such a bad thing? Anna realized she had fallen into a trap. They were taking ordinary situations and twisting them beyond recognition. A simple question to the gardener turned into a panic attack. Trying to hide a chocolate bar for later became hoarding due to childhood starvation. Every action she took was given a pathological explanation, and the scariest part, they did it with such compassion that anyone would believe in their sincere concern for their traumatized sister. That evening, Anna lay in her luxurious bed and cried. In the orphanage, she had been hated for her birthmark, seen as cursed. But at least there she had been a real person, with emotions and personality. Here, she had become a museum exhibit, the girl from the orphanage, someone to be studied, discussed, and pitied. Worst of all was the understanding that Kyle and Chloe were doing this intentionally. They had turned her story into a weapon against her. Every fact from her past, every detail, was twisted to make her look pitiful and damaged. And the most painful part, around their father, they kept up the act of being caring siblings. Robert saw their love for Anna and was happy that the family had so warmly welcomed his lost daughter. Tomorrow I have to go back there, Anna whispered into the darkness. And face all those looks, those whispers, that sympathy again. After a month of constant humiliation at school, Anna had become a shadow of herself. She barely spoke at dinner, walked quietly through the house, and tried to stay invisible. She began having nervous breakdowns, sometimes waking in tears at night, not even knowing why. Sweetheart, you look pale, Robert said one morning. Maybe you should take a day off from school? No, Papa, I'm fine, Anna replied quickly, though the thought of not going to school felt like salvation. Anna is just overwhelmed, Victoria said gently. Adjustment is always stressful. Isn't that right, kids? Of course, Chloe agreed. We're trying to help, but it's clear she's having a hard time. Yes, Kyle nodded. Yesterday she even cried in English class. The teacher was really worried. Robert frowned. Anna, is that true? I just didn't understand the assignment, the girl whispered. You see? Victoria said sympathetically. She's trying so hard to keep up, but the pressure is just too much. That evening, Anna overheard Robert calling the family doctor, discussing the possibility of a consultation with a psychologist. Her heart sank, so they really did think something was wrong with her. On Wednesday evening, during dinner, Robert made an announcement. Tomorrow morning, Anna has an appointment with Dr. Richards. He's a specialist in child psychology. That's good, Victoria approved. The girl needs professional help. But I don't want to see a psychologist, Anna said quietly. There's nothing wrong with me. Sweetheart, Robert said gently, you're going through a difficult time. The doctor will help you cope. We're all worried about you, Chloe added with fake concern. Right, Mom? Of course, Victoria nodded. We just want you to be happy. After dinner, Anna went upstairs and locked herself in her room. The thought of being sent to a psychiatrist terrified her. It meant they really did think she was crazy. It meant Kyle and Chloe's plan had worked perfectly. She sat on the bed and tried to calm down. But fragments of school gossip, the stares of classmates, and the teacher's comments about her special needs spun around in her head. It was suffocating. By midnight, Anna realized she couldn't stay there any longer. She needed to get out at least for a while from this beautiful house that had become her prison. She dressed quietly, packed a small bag with a few essentials, and carefully opened her bedroom door. The hallway was empty, the house was silent. On tiptoe, Anna made her way to the back stairs that led to the kitchen and slipped out through the service door into the garden. The night air was cool and fresh. Anna climbed over the low fence between the properties and found herself on a neighboring street. She didn't know where she was going, but she just kept walking, relishing the sense of freedom. The first to notice Anna's disappearance was Carmen, who came to wake her for breakfast in the morning. The bed was neatly made, but it was clear no one had slept in it. On the desk lay a note. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Don't look for me. Anna." "Senor Robert!" The housekeeper screamed, rushing down the stairs. "Senorita Anna is gone." The house instantly turned into a hive of activity. Robert was calling the police, Victoria put on a show of despair, and Kyle and Chloe helped with the search, suggesting places their unstable sister might have run off to. "I told you she needed help," Victoria sobbed. The poor girl couldn't handle the pressure. "She said everyone at school hated her," Kyle added. "We tried to support her, but maybe she was scared to see the psychologist," Chloe suggested. "She thought they'd label her mentally ill." The police began searching, but Carmen couldn't just sit and wait. The housekeeper reached out to all her contacts: gardeners, drivers, maids from nearby homes. She knew that among the household staff, there was an informal network of information that sometimes worked better than the police. By evening, one of the gardeners reported seeing a girl in a small park a few blocks from the house. Carmen went there immediately. Anna was sitting on a bench by a pond, hugging her knees. She looked lost and frightened, but alive and unharmed. "Senorita Anna," Carmen called softly as she approached the bench. The girl raised her tear-stained face. "Senora Carmen, I didn't mean to scare anyone. I just couldn't take it anymore." "I know, my child," the housekeeper said, wrapping her arms around the trembling girl. "I understand. But now we have to go home. Senor Robert is worried sick about you. He's going to send me to a psychiatrist," Anna whispered. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy." "We'll figure something out," Carmen promised, though she wasn't sure what. "What matters is that you're safe." When they returned home, Robert was beside himself with both relief and anger. "Anna, how could you scare us like that?" he exclaimed, pulling his daughter into a hug. We were so afraid." "I'm sorry, Papa," the girl said softly. "I just needed to think." "Think? You ran away from home. You left a note." Robert was shaken. "What if something had happened to you?" "Robert, darling, calm down," Victoria said gently. "The important thing is that Anna is home. Isn't that right, kids?" "Yes, we were so worried," said Chloe, hugging her sister. "We thought we'd never see you again." "Don't ever do that again," Kyle added. "We're a family. We're supposed to solve problems together. Tomorrow we're definitely going to see Dr. Richards," Robert said firmly. "After something like this, a consultation with a psychologist is absolutely necessary." Anna nodded, understanding that her escape had only made things worse. Now everyone had proof of her so-called instability. The next evening, Carmen was cleaning the library when she heard Victoria's voice coming from the adjacent study. The door was slightly ajar, and the woman was speaking on the phone loudly enough to be heard. "Yes, see how everything worked out perfectly," Victoria was saying. "Yesterday's little escape only confirmed everything we've been telling people." Carmen froze, dustcloth in hand. Something in her employer's tone made her uneasy. "Now we have all the proof of her instability," Victoria continued. "Bullying at school, emotional breakdowns, running away from home. Robert himself scheduled a psychiatrist for her. The housekeeper cautiously stepped closer to the door. "Listen to me carefully." Victoria's voice grew colder. "Now that everyone sees her as psychologically unstable, any unfortunate incident will seem perfectly natural. Understand? A damaged girl from an orphanage, unable to cope with her new life." A chill ran down Carmen's spine. What was Senora Victoria talking about? "Yes, exactly," the woman continued. "Everyone at school knows about her problems. If something happens, people will just assume she tried to run away again and miscalculated. Psychological trauma, a breakdown, a tragic accident." Carmen quietly stepped back from the door, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the whole house could hear it. Victoria was planning something terrible for Anna, using her recent escape as evidence of mental instability. The housekeeper knew she had to warn the girl or Senor Robert immediately. Carmen didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, she had made up her mind. She had to tell Robert about what she had overheard, no matter the consequences. After breakfast, she knocked on the door to his study. "Senor Robert, may I speak with you?" "It's very important." "Of course, Carmen," he replied, not looking up from his papers. "But make it quick, I have a flight in an hour." "Senor, last night I accidentally overheard Senora Victoria's phone conversation," she began, her voice trembling. "You were eavesdropping?" Robert frowned. "Carmen, that's not appropriate." "No, Senor, I was cleaning the library." The study door was open. She was talking about Senorita Anna needing to disappear. Robert's head shot up. "What did you just say?" "She said that Anna's escape gives the perfect justification for an accident. That everyone will think the girl just ran away again and..." "Enough!" Robert interrupted, rising from his desk. "Carmen, I understand you care about Anna, but what you're saying, it's a monstrous accusation." "Senor, I heard every word." "You misunderstood." Robert snapped angrily. "Victoria loves Anna like her own daughter. She has devoted herself to helping that child. Maybe she was speaking with the doctor about treatment, discussing medical terminology you misinterpreted." Carmen tried to protest. "But Senor, she spoke of making it look like an accident." "That's enough." Robert exploded. "Carmen, you've worked in our home for 15 years, and I respect you. But if you ever make such horrible insinuations about my wife again, I'll have no choice but to find you another position. This is unacceptable." Carmen turned pale. "I'm sorry, Senor," she said quietly. "Perhaps I really did misunderstand." "I hope so," Robert said, already returning to his papers. "Now excuse me. I need to prepare for my trip. And forget this conversation ever happened." Carmen left the study, realizing she was now completely alone. An hour later, Robert announced at breakfast that he had to urgently fly to Singapore. "The deal is about to fall apart," he explained, flipping through documents. "I have to handle this in person. I'll be back in 3 days." "Don't worry, darling," Victoria said, gently touching his hand. "We'll manage just fine. Won't we, kids?" "Of course," Chloe nodded. "We'll take care of Anna." "Yes," Kyle added. "We'll make sure she doesn't run away again." Robert looked at Anna with concern. "Sweetheart, promise me you won't do anything foolish. When I return, we'll go see Dr. Richards." "I promise, Papa," Anna said quietly. After Robert's departure, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Victoria became colder, and Kyle and Chloe no longer bothered to pretend to be friendly. "Finally," said Chloe as the limousine disappeared behind the gates. 3 days without the show. "Yes, we can finally relax," Kyle agreed. All day, the housekeeper remained on high alert. Anna, too, felt the tension. She did her best not to be alone with her stepmother and her children. That evening at dinner, Victoria was overly sweet. "Anna, darling, you look tired," she said. "Maybe you should go to bed early?" "Yes, maybe," Anna replied. "I'll bring you some warm milk," Victoria offered. "It'll help you fall asleep." Carmen grew even more suspicious. After what she had heard that morning, she was certain Victoria would act soon. "Thank you, but that's not necessary," Anna quickly said. "I'm not in the mood for milk." "Don't be silly," Victoria insisted. "You need proper rest after everything you've been through." Half an hour later, Victoria came up to Anna's room with a glass of milk. "Here you go, darling," she said, placing the glass on the bedside table. "This will help calm your nerves." "Thank you," Anna said, but she didn't drink it. Carmen, who had intentionally stayed nearby, overheard the conversation. When Victoria left, the housekeeper quietly knocked on Anna's door. "Señorita, may I come in?" "Of course, Señora Carmen." "Don't drink the milk," Carmen whispered, pointing to the glass. "Why?" Anna asked, surprised. "Because I know what Señora Victoria is planning. This morning I tried to warn your father, but he didn't believe me. He said I misunderstood some medical conversation." Carmen told Anna everything about the phone call she had overheard, her attempt to warn Robert, and how he had dismissed it all. "She wants to kill me?" Anna whispered. "I'm afraid so. And your escape gave her the perfect excuse. Everyone will think you ran away again and something tragic happened." Anna stared at the glass of milk in horror. "What should I do?" "Pretend you drank the milk," Carmen advised. "I'll keep watch. If anything happens, I'll call the police right away. This time, I'll have proof." Anna poured the milk into a flower pot and lay down in bed, pretending to be asleep. Carmen left the room but stayed in the hallway, keeping her eyes on the girl's door. An hour later, Victoria approached Anna's room. She quietly opened the door and peeked inside. "Anna," she called softly. The girl didn't respond, feigning deep sleep. Victoria stepped up to the bed and gently shook Anna's shoulder. She didn't move. "Perfect," Victoria whispered, then slipped out of the room. Carmen had hidden in the room next door as the stepmother passed by. A few minutes later, she heard Victoria speaking on the phone. "Come now. Back entrance. She's asleep." Carmen's heart clenched. Someone was coming to the house, Victoria's accomplice. She quickly returned to Anna. "Señorita, get up quickly," she whispered. "Someone is coming." Anna sat up in bed, trembling with fear. "What should I do?" "Hide in the bathroom and lock the door," Carmen said. "I'll go call for help." Anna crept into the bathroom and locked herself in. Carmen quietly made her way down the servants' staircase to the back entrance. There, she saw a strange man entering the house, tall, dressed in dark clothing, with a menacing expression. "Where is she?" he asked Victoria. "Upstairs, in her room." "Out like a light," she replied. "Take her to the cliff in Malibu." "I'll be at the Wilson's charity gala. I have an alibi." "What if she wakes up on the way?" "She won't. The dose will last several hours." Carmen carefully backed away and pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed emergency services. "Police," she whispered. "I need help. The Harrison estate in Beverly Hills. Someone is trying to abduct a child." Meanwhile, upstairs, the man was climbing the stairs with Victoria. They approached Anna's room, and Victoria quietly opened the door. "There she is," Victoria whispered, pointing to the bed with pillows under the blanket. The man walked over and pulled back the blanket only to find a pile of pillows instead of the girl. "What the hell?" he began. Then he decided to check the bathroom. He tugged at the doorknob, but it was locked. Breaking the door down would be reckless. A shattered door in a child's room would raise suspicions. Anna crouched in the corner, time crawling unbearably slowly. Meanwhile, Victoria returned with a hairpin, which the man used to pick the lock. Anna screamed with all her might. The man grabbed her and clamped a hand over her mouth. At that very moment, police officers burst into the room. "Police! Hands in the air!" shouted one of them. The man tried to run, but he was tackled and restrained. Victoria tried to feign innocence. "Officer, I don't understand what's happening," she exclaimed. I heard screaming and came to see what was going on. And who is this man? Asked the officer, pointing to the arrested intruder. I have no idea. He must be a burglar. But Carmen stepped forward. I heard everything, she said. This woman was planning a murder. I'm a witness. Anna was pale and shaking, but alive and unharmed. I'm okay, she whispered, hugging Carmen. Thank you for saving me. Victoria kept denying all accusations, but the arrested man, realizing he was caught, began to talk. Victoria Harrison. He shouted to the police. It was all her idea. She wanted to get rid of the girl, the heir to the Harrison fortune. Victoria turned white, realizing the game was over. Within an hour, the house was filled with police officers, detectives, and child protection agents. Carmen sat beside Anna in the living room while the girl gave her statement to the detectives. Senora Carmen, Anna said quietly, what will happen when Papa comes back? She'll be alive and that's all that matters to him, the housekeeper replied. And he'll understand what kind of danger you were in. This time, the police have all the evidence. What if he still doesn't believe me? Anna whispered. He will, Carmen said firmly. There's too much proof against Victoria now. And my testimony is supported by facts. Anna nodded and squeezed the kind woman's hand tighter. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up. For protecting me. I promised Senor Robert I would take care of you when you were just a little girl, Carmen said. And I kept my word. Outside, dawn was breaking. The longest night of Anna's life was finally ending. Robert received the call at 2:30 a.m. Singapore time. The detective from Los Angeles spoke calmly, but each word struck like lightning. Mr. Harrison, your daughter is safe. But there's been an incident. Your wife has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. The phone slipped from Robert's hand. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Victoria? His elegant, caring wife? Attempted murder of Anna? That's not possible, he whispered when the detective repeated the information. There must be some mistake. I'm afraid not, sir. We have witnesses, recorded conversations, and an arrested accomplice. We recommend you return immediately. Robert canceled all his meetings and was on a flight home within 2 hours. The entire way, he couldn't stop replaying the words in his head. Victoria, who had so patiently helped Anna adapt, who had suggested therapy, who had played the role of a loving stepmother. How could he have been so blind? At the Los Angeles airport, he was met by Detective Morris. Mr. Harrison, your daughter is in the custody of Child Protective Services until your return. She's safe, but very shaken. Where's Victoria? Robert asked hoarsely. In jail. No bail has been granted due to the seriousness of the charges. Mr. Harrison, I have to warn you the situation is worse than you think. On the drive home, the detective explained the details. The sleeping drug in the milk. The accomplice, Mark Delano, who was supposed to take Anna to the cliffs in Malibu. The plan was to make it look like suicide or an accident involving an unstable child. Your housekeeper, Carmen, saved your daughter's life, the detective said. She overheard Mrs. Harrison's plan and contacted us just in time. Robert remembered the morning conversation with Carmen, her attempt to warn him. How he had waved her off, called her words slander, even threatened to fire her. Shame burned inside him. The house greeted him with silence and emptiness. Kyle and Chloe had been sent to their biological father until their role in the incident was fully investigated. Anna was in the custody of Child Protective Services. Dad. The girl cried when he was brought to her. She rushed into his arms, and Robert felt tears streaming down his face. Forgive me, he whispered, holding his daughter tightly. Forgive me for not believing you. For not protecting you. You didn't know, Anna said softly. She was really good at pretending. But I should have seen it. I should have listened to you, to Carmen. I was a blind fool. The following weeks were a whirlwind of interrogations, meetings with lawyers, and court preparations. Robert hired the best attorneys not to defend Victoria, but to ensure she received the maximum sentence. The details that emerged during the investigation shocked even the most seasoned detectives. Victoria Harrison, née Victoria Stone, had a long history of fraud and marrying for money. She had been married twice before to elderly wealthy men, both of whom had died suddenly of heart attacks. "She's a professional killer," the prosecutor explained to Robert. "Very intelligent and calculating. Your marriage was part of a long-term plan. She intended to kill you in a few years, once she had access to the main portion of your estate. And Anna's return? Ruined everything. A biological daughter takes precedence in inheritance. Victoria realized she had to get rid of the girl before she could go after you." Mark Delano, Victoria's accomplice, turned out to be a petty criminal with a long rap sheet and her lover. Under mounting evidence, he began to testify against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. "She promised me a cut if I got rid of the kid," he admitted in court. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Victoria remained cold and arrogant, denying all charges to the very end. Her lawyers tried to frame the case as a misunderstanding, claiming their client only meant to scare her stepdaughter into leaving voluntarily. Defended Victoria Harrison, the judge began the sentencing. "You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in prison without the possibility of early release." Victoria didn't flinch as the sentence was read. She simply stood up and cast a cold glance at Robert, who sat in the courtroom. Mark Delano received 10 years for being an accomplice. Kyle and Chloe were not criminally charged. They were recognized as victims of their mother's manipulation. However, a psychological evaluation revealed that the teenagers had actively participated in bullying Anna, even if they were unaware of Victoria's ultimate plan. Kyle and Chloe remained with their biological father. That evening, after the verdict, Robert and Anna sat in the garden of their home. Carmen had prepared dinner, but neither of them had the appetite to eat. "Anna," Robert said, taking his daughter's hand, "I want you to know no one will ever hurt you again." "I promise." "I know, Dad," the girl replied. "And I don't blame you. Victoria fooled all of us. But you tried to tell me about the problems at school, about how Kyle and Chloe treated you. And I didn't listen. You couldn't have known they were bullying me on purpose. They were very clever." Robert was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Anna, I want to ask you something. In court, you said your name is Louisa. That you want me to call you Louisa, not Anna. Why?" The girl looked up at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. "Because Anna is the girl who disappeared 10 years ago. Small, helpless. And Louisa is the one who survived the orphanage, who endured everything, who was stronger than her enemies." Robert nodded, understanding. "Louisa is the one who helped other kids during the epidemic," she continued. "Who learned to read thanks to Father Miguel. Who didn't break, even when everyone believed she was cursed. And now? Now I want to stay Louisa. But Louisa Harrison. Your daughter." Robert hugged her, and they sat in silence, savoring the peace after months of nightmare. "Louisa," he said softly. "My dear daughter Louisa." "Dad," the girl asked after a while, "did you really say I used to want to be a doctor?" "Yes. You were always playing doctor, treating all your dolls." "Then I want to be a doctor again. A real one." "You will," Robert promised. "You will become the best doctor in the world." And for the first time in many months, Louisa smiled, truly smiled. Somewhere in a prison cell, Victoria Harrison sat alone, reflecting on how her perfect plan had failed, all because of an old Mexican housekeeper and a 13-year-old girl from an orphanage. 3 months after the trial, Louisa stood in front of her new school, but this time without fear. St. Teresa's Medical Academy specialized in preparing future doctors, and Robert had chosen it for a reason. "Are you sure this is where you want to be?" he asked as they stepped out of the car. "The program is very demanding." "I'm sure, Dad," Louisa replied, adjusting her backpack. "I'm ready." And she truly was. Over the past few months, Robert had hired the best tutors in biology, chemistry, and English. Louisa studied with the passion of someone who had finally found what they were meant to do. Unlike St. Margaret's, no one here knew her past. She was simply Louisa Harrison, a new student who wanted to become a doctor. No whispers about the orphanage, no pitying looks, no special circumstances. "Welcome to our school," said the principal, Dr. Evans. "I've heard your science results are quite impressive." "Thank you," Louisa replied. "I really want to learn." The first weeks at the new school felt like a dream. Her classmates were serious, motivated teenagers who also dreamed of medical careers. They discussed cell structures, not gossip. They competed in anatomy knowledge, not in the price of their clothes. "Louisa, can you help me with biochemistry?" asked her desk partner, Sarah. "You're really good at it." "Of course," Louisa replied, and warmth filled her chest. She was valued for her knowledge, not pitted for her past. Things had changed at home, too. Robert barely worked in the months following the trial. He dedicated all his time to his daughter. They had breakfast together, he helped her with homework, they walked in the garden and talked for hours. Carmen had become more than just a housekeeper. She was now a true member of the family. Robert doubled her salary and officially appointed her as house manager, but to Louisa, she was simply a beloved grandmother. "Señorita Louisa," Carmen said one evening as she brushed the girl's hair, "you've changed so much. You're more confident, more joyful." And then came an unexpected joy. Robert contacted the Santa Maria orphanage and invited Señora Maria to become the head chef in their home. The kind woman who used to secretly give Louisa pastries could hardly believe the offer she had received. "Señorita Louisa," she exclaimed when she arrived in Beverly Hills. "You've grown up so much. You've become so beautiful." "Señora Maria," Louisa hugged the elderly woman, tears in her eyes. "I missed you so much. I missed your pastries." "Then I'll bake them every day," the cook laughed. Now the house always smelled of fresh bread. But the most important test came during a visit to a hospital where Louisa's class had gone on a field trip. "Today, you'll see how modern medicine works," the doctor explained. The group toured various departments, listened to lectures from physicians, and observed procedures. Louisa absorbed every word, every detail. Here, she felt at home. In the pediatric ward, they saw a 7-year-old girl with a high fever. Nurses bustled around her, doctors consulted each other, but no one could determine the cause of her illness. "It's been 3 days with a fever of 104, said a nurse. "Antibiotics aren't working, blood tests are normal." Louisa stepped closer and looked carefully at the little patient. Something about the case felt familiar, not the girl herself, but the pattern of symptoms. "Excuse me," Louisa said quietly to the doctor. "May I look at her neck?" "Why?" the doctor asked, surprised. "I think I see a faint rash." "Very small." The doctor leaned in and indeed saw tiny red spots on the girl's neck. "My God," he whispered. "How did you notice that?" "We had an outbreak of dengue fever at the orphanage," Louisa explained. "The rash only appears on the 3rd day, and it's very easy to miss. But if you don't start treatment in time, run tests for dengue immediately." The doctor ordered the nurses. "And start 4 fluids." The results came in an hour later and confirmed the diagnosis. The girl had a severe case of dengue fever, and without immediate treatment, her condition would have become critical. "How did you spot that?" the astonished doctor asked. "I've been a pediatrician for 20 years and I missed that symptom." "When you've been sick yourself and taken care of other sick people, you remember every detail," Louisa replied. "In the orphanage, we had to be very attentive." After the tour, the doctor asked to speak with Robert privately. "Mr. Harrison," he said, "your daughter has a true gift. She saved that child's life. At 14, she made a diagnosis that experienced physicians missed." Robert looked at his daughter with pride and astonishment. "She's always wanted to be a doctor," he said. "Even at 5, she was playing doctor." "Then don't let her give up on that dream," the doctor said seriously. "She has the intuition of a real healer. Medicine needs people like her." That evening, Louisa sat in the garden with her teddy bear, Teddy, whom she had found again among her old toys. Robert came over and sat beside her. "How are you feeling after today?" he asked. "Happy," Louisa answered. "When I saw the little girl getting better." "Are you sure?" "There will be years of study ahead, tough exams." "Dad," Louisa turned to him, "in the orphanage they called me cursed because of my birthmark. Said I brought bad luck. But today, I saved a child." "You're going to be a wonderful doctor," Robert promised. "And a wonderful person." He hugged his daughter, and together they sat in silence, watching the sun set behind the hills of Beverly Hills. "Do you know what Senora Maria told me today?" Louisa asked softly. "She said that Father Miguel still holds a prayer service for my health every week." And high in the sky, the first stars began to shine, and one of them, the brightest, seemed to wink at the girl who was once a cursed orphan but had now become a beloved daughter with a bright future and a big dream.